Clear your search history. I've got some new ones that I know you're going to search because I'm telling you not to. But hey, don't say I didn't warn ya. Here is part 4 of the top 10 terrifying things you should never Google. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Guinea worm disease. This is a neglected tropical disease that is caused by a parasite, and it really is just terrible. This disease unfortunately affects poor communities, especially in remote areas of the world that do not have water that is safe to drink. Basically, what happens with this disease is a person will become infected after drinking water containing the water fleas that are infected with the larva of the Guinea worm. That already sounds terrible to me, but it does get worse. The worms will then penetrate the digestive tract and stay here while they grow to size. Okay, even worse. But it keeps going. About a year later, these horrible creatures will then migrate to a spot where they want to exit, normally somewhere on a lower limb. From here, they will create a very painful blister on the skin, which will eventually burst into an excruciatingly painful open wound. From here, the real nightmare starts, because not only is the pain terrible, but it will last for several weeks, while a long, sometimes up to 1 meter, string-like worm will slowly crawl out of this wound. It honestly makes me sick thinking about it. This process can have a person totally unable to really move for around 3 to 10 weeks it takes for the worm to leave the body. This is complete nightmare fuel. At this point, there isn't a treatment or prevention for this disease other than having access to safe water, of course, which should be a reality for every human. In good news, however, the number of cases of this has dropped drastically since the mid-1980s, and hopefully it could be on its way to eradication. All in all, unless you want a complete horror show and some awful imagery burned into your brain forever, maybe skip the Google search of this one. Alright, I told you what you need to know. In our number 9 spot today, we have locked-in syndrome. We've all heard of sleep paralysis, but what if I told you that there was a worse, scarier version of it? Locked-in syndrome is like sleep paralysis, but the awake version. It's a condition which renders the patient completely unable to move, aside from vertical eye movements and blinking. The patient is completely conscious and aware of what is happening, and able to communicate with eye movements, but everything else is, well, locked in. The cause of this is due to damage in the lower brain and brain stem with no damage to the upper parts. This can happen from things like poisoning, a brain stem stroke, a traumatic brain injury, or a lesion of the brain stem, as well as many other factors. The scariest thing, however, is that there is an even worse version called total locked-in syndrome, where the patient isn't even able to move their eyes. Unfortunately, most people who experience this never have any significant motor function return, as there really isn't a cure. There have been people who have made a spontaneous full recovery though, so there certainly is hope. But aside from this hope, learning about this sent me down a total rabbit hole of similar conditions I had no idea about. I don't know how people get through medical school, learning about the multitude of horrifying things that could potentially happen to a person. In our number 8 spot today, we have trypophobia. This word was really coined or created back in 2005 when someone posted about it on an online forum, and although it is not an officially recognized disorder, it is possible to be diagnosed as a specific phobia in extreme cases, and it's a thing that many of us experience on some level. Basically, Wikipedia describes trypophobia as, quote, an aversion to the sight of irregular patterns or clusters of small holes or bumps. This means that a Google search of the word will have all of the worst images for someone experiencing trypophobia popping up right at the top. It's honestly so strange how something like this could make such a large number of people horrifically uncomfortable, but alas, it really does. Scientists aren't quite sure how trypophobia really developed. There's quite a limited understanding of it due to limited research, but right now the leading theory is that it is possible that it could be a bit of an evolutionary revulsion where we as humans associate this sort of imagery with disease or poison or other danger. Well, that is pretty fascinating. I'm just warning you. The results could be nauseating. I'm like mid-level trypophobic. I feel like I experience mild discomfort seeing these images, but I know for some people it's full-blown horror. If you're a trypophobe though, you might want to skip this next point. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Suriname toad birth. Okay, so these little toads. Suriname toads are these flat, leaf-looking amphibians from South America, and they find their home in the rainforests of the area. That is all fine. Frogs are kinda cute. That is, until it's time for these guys to reproduce. That is because during mating season, the males will deposit dozens of fertilized eggs onto the females' backs. Okay, a little unusual, not too bad. Well, until that female's skin starts to grow around these eggs like bubble wrap to keep them safe. For the next few months, the eggs develop in these little special enclosures, but once it's time for birth is where the real horror starts. These little guys eventually just erupt from the back of the mom. It's just a horrifying birthing experience. And if you have trypophobia, like we just talked about, then this is truly a worst nightmare. To anyone, this is a pretty disgusting sight, but that fear will only heighten the dramatics of this one. There are plenty of videos of this birthing process all over the internet, and while some of these videos definitely went viral, it's for all of the wrong reasons. In our number 6 spot today, we have the seahorse birth. Speaking of animals giving birth in strange ways, let's talk about the reasons why you should never Google a seahorse giving birth. I can't be the only one who is highly uncomfortable by the sight, but I'm not entirely sure why I don't like it. Seahorses are pretty cool, they're pretty cute, and generally I personally don't have a problem with them. That is, until they start shooting out kids by the dozen. There aren't many birthing processes that look like it's a fun, nice time, but this one really just looks stressful. An interesting thing about seahorse reproduction is that the males of this species are actually responsible for carrying the children. Seahorse fathers incubate their developing embryos in a pouch located on their tail. Their tail basically serves as the equivalent of a female uterus seen in mammals. When birthing time rolls around, these fathers are giving birth by basically shooting these babies out of the tail, but there's thousands of them. It looks like the seahorse is having contractions or maybe something similar. Definitely not a scientist, but with every contraction, thousands of tiny little baby seahorses pop out, and while the miracle of life is a beautiful process, it also leaves me feeling really uncomfortable. Super happy for the new dad and all, just don't want to be flooded with seahorse birthing videos, personally. In our number 5 spot today, we have Epidermolysis Bullosa. With every part of this series, I learn about one more thing I didn't know I needed to be afraid of, and this is one of those things. This skin condition is quite a rare one, and it is one that affects the skin. It causes the skin to be extremely fragile and often blistering. These blisters can occur from the simplest things like minor injuries, even from just rubbing or scratching. There are even some more severe cases where this blistering can occur inside of the body, like on the inside of the mouth or even the inside of the stomach, which sounds so awful. This is something that is inherited, and while you normally can tell soon after birth, sometimes symptoms don't present themselves until teenage or young adult years. Symptoms include things like fragile skin that blisters easily, especially on the palms and feet, nails that are thick or unformed, scalp blistering and hair loss, skin that looks thin, and dental problems such as tooth decay. Unfortunately, there is not a cure for this skin condition, and treatment just focuses on healing present blisters and trying to prevent new ones. All in all, this sounds like a really painful thing for those who have to deal with it, and googling this term will have some really graphic and sometimes even gory photos coming up, which is exactly why it's a term that is best to stay away from when it comes to the search bar. Being informed is great. Seeing horrifying images, well, less great, for sure. In our number 4 spot today, we have the wandering black hole. The James Webb Telescope is one of the most exciting space tools of all time, and it has already revealed some incredible information and photos to us in its debut year. But in order to fully feel how incredible these things are, we have to remember where we came from. The James Webb was preceded by the infamous Hubble Space Telescope. The Hubble walked so James Webb could run. Since its launch into low Earth orbit in the 1990s, this space telescope has been delivering us amazing space discoveries, and this one is a bit of a frightening one. Back in 2017, the Hubble located a black hole, which is already frightening, but this one was peculiar. That is because they found out that this one was being pulled or manipulated by gravitational waves. Basically what this means is that at some point, this black hole is going to escape its own galaxy and begin roaming the universe. Black holes are bad enough. I don't want them to start wandering around. Turns out, however, that this really is a possibility, and it's happened in more than this one instance. Googling these wandering black holes is sure to send anyone into a doomsday spin. The good news, however, is that despite this black hole weighing approximately the same as 1 billion suns as it flies through space at 5 million miles per hour, it's estimated to be about 8 billion light years from Earth, so at this point, we're pretty safe. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Amazonian giant centipede. These Centipedes are the largest centipede species in the world, with the ability to grow over a foot. These gross things will prey on basically anything they can, which includes other large insects, spiders, millipedes, scorpions, even tarantulas. But because they're so huge, it also includes small lizards, frogs, snakes, mice, and even bats. They have crazy hunting techniques for the largest of their prey, and have been known to climb on the ceiling of caves in order to get the bats, which is both incredible and very scary. These things are also venomous, and while it hasn't been a common occurrence for humans to die from a bite, there is one recorded incident that took place in 2014. This incident happened in Venezuela, and a person passed away after being bitten by one of these giant centipedes after it had hidden itself in an empty soda can. There are a lot of dangerous things crawling around on the forest floor of the Amazon, but this one might take the cake on the most disgusting looking. In our number 2 spot today, we have invisible fire. A lot of these horrible searches are horrible because of the images that the search will reveal, but for this one, the issue with it is the fact that you can't see it. Invisible fires are actually ethanol fires. These are the fires that are created by alcohol, even the kinds we drink, and motor fuel as well, which is why they can be quite an issue for race car drivers and crews. Ethanol burns blue and smokeless, but these blue flames can be virtually invisible to the naked eye. This provides an incredibly huge obstacle, obviously. We now know how dangerous and deadly fires can be, so how do we fight something that is dangerous and deadly but that we can't see? It truly is one of those things that upon learning about, I suddenly developed some sort of an irrational fear over it. And that one scene in Talladega Nights makes a lot more sense now. In our number 1 spot today, we have alien hand syndrome. If someone told me about this before I made this list, I would have thought that they were trying to play like a silly little trick on me, but this one really does exist. Alien hand syndrome is an eerie phenomenon that occurs when a person suddenly does not have control over their hand or any limb anymore. The hand will begin acting like it has a mind of its own, which truly is a terrifying thought. Sometimes people will find themselves in a situation where they're forced to keep the alien hand under control with a hand they thankfully still have control over, so as to ensure they don't harm themselves or anyone else. The most common factor regarding this syndrome is that the primary motor cortex, which controls the hand movement, is isolated from the premotor cortex influences, but it still remains intact and able to execute movements. All in all, this isn't like the deadliest one on this list, but it certainly is very, very creepy, and unless you want to be incredibly freaked out, I would potentially refrain from googling it. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I will see you again soon. Bye!